My stepsister stole my fiance and sent me postcards, which she then used to rub in. Now, they are broke and begging me for a job at the family business, which she was supposed to inherit. I was engaged to my boyfriend from college about 4 years ago. We had been together throughout college and then got engaged at the age of 23. After a year of engagement, my then fiancé, Greg, took off with my stepsister, Melissa, and left me a letter. In the letter, Greg mentioned that he had started an affair with Melissa a couple of months prior. The wedding was scheduled to take place a week later. After we became engaged, it became apparent that he could not marry me because it would be unfair to both of us and to Melissa, who was in love with him. He suggested that the universe had led him to his true love, and that he could not be with me anymore and cheat. They effectively extinguished the prospect of a happy future for all of us by agreeing to marry me. They subsequently disengaged from the situation and I did not have any further contact with them until recently. Greg's parents assumed responsibility for the entire cost of the wedding, which I did not have to contribute to because they were so distressed by their son's actions. However, this was the last occasion on which I had any contact with them. Since that time, I have had no further contact with my family. My parents were extremely embarrassed, and my father was so incensed that he considered hiring a private detective to track down the two of them and force them to return home for answers. My father is actually my stepfather, but he has been my father since I was very young. I have always addressed him as such because to me he is my only father. I have never known my biological father. My father left our family shortly after I was born, and my mother never met him again, as he had signed away his rights over me. He relinquished his rights over me, and they had never been married. She then married my father when I was 8 years old. Melissa and I used to attend the same school, and that's how our parents met each other. However, for some reason, Melissa decided that she didn't like me, and then proceeded to treat me badly for the next couple of years. She was a bully in the truest sense of the word. Her and her friends would constantly pick on me when we were at school. It didn't even stop when we got home, she would just keep looking for opportunities to make me feel bad. I did complain to my parents several times, and they tried to reprimand her, but despite my parents' attempts to intervene, Melissa and her friends continued to harass me throughout my school years. Their behavior was so severe that it became a significant source of distress for me. My father was not present in my life, and Melissa's mother was also absent. However, this was not due to any neglect on their part. Melissa's mother had passed away a few years after Melissa's birth. She was born after her mother's death from an epileptic episode. Consequently, whenever my mother attempted to discipline her, she would assert that she had no right to educate her because she was not her biological mother. My father also attempted to persuade her to cease her bullying of me, but it proved ineffective. Despite the various disciplinary measures employed by her parents, including verbal reprimands and attempts at persuasion, the child continued to engage in bullying behavior. On occasion, her parents even threatened to send her away, yet she persisted in her actions, demonstrating a lack of concern for the consequences of her actions. By the time she reached middle school, her behavior had deteriorated significantly. By the time we were in high school, she had already developed a number of problematic habits and was exhibiting signs of juvenile delinquency. She had started smoking and would occasionally leave the house to drink alcohol with her friends, who were similarly problematic. It was not until she was arrested with her friends one night for breaking into a house while intoxicated that our parents finally decided to send her away and obtain the assistance that she clearly required. After a few weeks of pleading and protesting, my parents finally persuaded her to attend a rehabilitation center for troubled adolescents. The teenager was initially reluctant to accept this decision, but her father was unwavering in his stance. He made it clear that if she wished to remain in the family and avoid further trouble, she would have to undergo rehabilitation. As her behavior was becoming increasingly problematic, he could no longer allow it to continue. Consequently, she left. In our sophomore year, she did not return until we had already graduated. She had enrolled in a school near the rehabilitation center and was living with her aunt. I did not see her for those couple of years, primarily because I was not interested in how my most significant bully was doing. My parents would visit her every weekend. She would inquire as to whether I wished to accompany her, yet I consistently declined. Her companions began to ignore me and feign my non-existence after she departed, which markedly enhanced my high school experience. I was no longer subjected to relentless bullying. Melissa continued her education. Upon returning from rehab, Melissa initially expressed remorse for her previous actions and seemed to have a more composed demeanor. I was initially inclined to forgive her, given that we were about to embark on our college journey together. However, the timing of our reconciliation was not ideal, as we were already preparing for college. I relocated and so did she. We would only return for the holidays. After that, she was considerably more cordial towards me. By cordial, I do not mean that she would actually behave in a polite manner towards me. I mean that she would simply ignore me instead of picking on me every chance she got, as she had done in the past. If I am being candid, that is. This was a much welcome change of pace, as I would rather be ignored than bullied. Our parents observed this, but did not attempt to force us to get along or act like sisters, given our history. This was more than sufficient. Then I began dating Greg. After being together for a year, I decided to bring him home for Thanksgiving to introduce him to my parents. We all got along well, and for the first time, I noticed that even Melissa was taking an interest in the conversation, which was a rare occurrence. Ever since she returned from rehab, she and Greg were actually getting along, and after she started dating him, she began expressing a greater interest in becoming my friend and frequently sought my company for conversation, a behavior that was previously absent. I was uncertain about the nature of her actions and had a vague suspicion that she might have a romantic interest in Greg. Consequently, I decided to inquire directly about her motives. I was concerned that her interest in becoming my friend was due to her feelings for Greg. She laughed at this suggestion, stating that this was not the case. However, Greg had mentioned at our first dinner together that he had a close relationship with his siblings. This conversation had prompted her to reconsider her feelings towards me. Since her return, she had been behaving in a manner that was not consistent with her previous conduct. Consequently, she was attempting to rectify the situation and improve our relationship. While her actions were not directly related to Greg, he had played a role in prompting her to reconsider our relationship. She informed me that she had held me responsible for her departure. She attributed her prolonged absence to my role in the situation, but eventually came to recognize that my actions were not the cause of her departure. She had brought this upon herself through her own misbehavior, and it was time for her to cease punishing me for it and begin integrating herself into the family. It was not until she apologized to me from the bottom of her heart and actively attempted to repair our relationship that I was able to forgive her. I am an emotional individual, and the impact of her words that day was profound. I was so affected by her actions that I decided to forgive her and pursue a friendship with her. However, this decision ultimately caused the greatest pain. After a period of amicable relations, the subject betrayed me. We had been on good terms for a considerable length of time and she had been actively involved in the wedding preparations. While we were not the closest of friends, our relationship had improved significantly since we began rebuilding it. We would meet at least once or twice every month. Over the course of a month, we spoke with one another on a regular basis. By the time I got engaged, we were doing well. I had also introduced her to Greg in person before the engagement. When we would meet at family events and other occasions, they behaved in a normal manner. Therefore, I never suspected anything because I had no reason to do so, even after the engagement. The couple continued to behave as if nothing was amiss, and I never considered the possibility that Greg might have a romantic interest in Melissa. It simply never crossed my mind because Greg presented a convincing front of being in love with me while he was actually engaged in an affair with Melissa. Even she was unaware of the extent of his infidelity. He was adept at feigning friendship, which prevented me from discovering the truth until it was too late. By that point, they had already departed. My parents sought to trace them and bring them back home, but I persuaded them to refrain from doing so, as I was simply seeking to forget the incident. It was sufficient that the two of them had made me look foolish and run away. I was a complete fool, and I fled a week before my wedding. I was experiencing significant depression, and I was simply unable to cope with any further distress. I spent the following couple of weeks working and sleeping, attempting to avoid confronting my feelings. It was evident that I was emotionally distressed, and I was merely numb. However, the most distressing incident occurred a few weeks after my purported wedding day. I received a postcard from Melissa, who was in California. However, this was not the most concerning aspect. Melissa had also used a number of photographs of herself with Greg, and they appeared to be genuinely happy. It was evident that she was attempting to provoke me by mentioning that she was sorry about the surprise before my wedding. However, it was clear that she was not genuinely remorseful, and her actions were intended to inflict emotional distress. At that moment, I realized that she had never truly forgiven me for what had transpired years ago and continued to hold me responsible for her being sent away. Furthermore, she had never expressed any desire to be my friend. The point was that she had just used me to get to where she wanted to be, and I had trusted her and let her use me as a stepping stone. It was a really diabolical plan. I'll have to give her credit for days after she sent me that postcard. I couldn't even sleep because I was losing my mind over this. It was a really traumatic experience for me, and I had to get therapy for months to undo all the damage and deal with my trust issues. The postcard wasn't even a one, the incident in question was an isolated occurrence. Subsequent to this, she continued to send me postcards of herself and Greg for several months. The relationship eventually concluded approximately 1 year later, due to my lack of response or involvement in the ongoing drama. Our parents were understandably displeased with the situation and severed all ties with her. They did not even attempt to contact her after the initial postcard was sent. This was a significant loss for Melissa, as she was on the verge of inheriting her father's business. She was majoring in business, and this was a contributing factor in her decision to pursue this path. However, after my father severed all ties with my mother after she had pulled off a scheme to gain control of the family business, he informed me that I could join him instead, as he felt compelled to make up for past misdeeds. However, I lacked the requisite qualifications for the role, having studied history rather than business. My father acknowledged this, stating that he was willing to teach me everything he knew so that I could eventually take over the business. I agreed to this arrangement and began working under him, with the aim of learning how to run the business. He was able to retire and transfer the reins to me after a period of time during which he had worked extremely hard. Last year, I was finally promoted, and my father retired. It was an incredible feeling because I had started from scratch and had to learn everything. However, everything was running smoothly under my guidance, and this has been the case for some time. My parents are now able to spend more time together without worrying about the business because I am taking care of it. This has been the case for quite some time, and I pretty much stopped thinking about Greg after I started working for my father. My father was the primary source of my distress. However, I was able to move on with the help of therapy. I would now say that I have completely moved on and no longer think about them or what they did. I never thought that they would ever reach out to me again, let alone ask for my help. It would take a great deal of courage and an utter lack of functioning brain cells to ask me to help them out after they screwed me over and made a fool out of me. It is a testament to their lack of moral fiber and a complete absence of functional brain cells that they have sought my assistance after they have wronged me and made a fool of me. They have also sought to rub it in my face. However, it is perhaps indicative of a deeper problem within the family that Melissa and Greg have reached out to me a few days later. On that particular day, I was at home because it was the weekend. Around lunchtime, I heard someone frantically ringing my doorbell. I initially thought it was the pizza that I had ordered, so I did not think much of it when I opened the door. Instead of a delivery guy, however, I found Melissa standing outside my house looking really worried. I was taken aback by this turn of events and did not know what to say. I simply waited for her to speak while looking at her. I then realized that she was definitely there to ask for help because she was looking destitute and her appearance gave her away. From an early age, Melissa had a penchant for fashion. However, on this occasion, she was attired in garments that were visibly worn and had clearly been purchased a considerable time ago. Her jeans were notably short, and her appearance suggested that she had not been eating well. I had already formed the opinion that whatever she was about to request, the answer would be negative. Consequently, when she informed me that she required my assistance due to the prolonged difficulties she and Greg had been experiencing since his unemployment began a few months prior, I was not surprised. Instead, I was concerned about the lack of effort he had made to find a new job. The individual in question had recently commenced a new position, despite having previously attempted to secure employment on her own. This was due to her decision to relinquish her previous employment to assume domestic responsibilities following her relocation with Greg. Consequently, she had been unable to maintain a consistent work history, resulting in a notable gap in her professional resume. Her lack of employment history made her a less competitive candidate for the positions she had been applying for. She informed me that she had heard from a couple of relatives that our father had retired and had handed over the reins of the business to me. Consequently, she was here to ask me if I would be willing to hire Greg and give him a position within the company. Melissa informed me that she had traveled to my residence solely to request assistance. She expressed remorse for her past actions but emphasized that she was now relying on me to provide a solution. She stated that she had not yet consulted with our parents and had directly sought my assistance. She had come to my house to request assistance because she was aware that I was a kind-hearted individual and felt immense guilt about her past betrayal of me. However, she was confident that I would not reject her now that she was in need of my help. Her sense of entitlement was so extreme that I found myself laughing in her face and informing her that I informed her that I would not be hiring her because I do not tolerate infidelity. I then closed the door in her face and retreated to the living room, preparing to contact the authorities if she did not leave my property immediately. Fortunately, she did depart that day, but she has not ceased contacting me. After her visit, I promptly contacted our parents and informed them of the situation. They informed me that they had heard from a couple of their neighbors that Melissa had returned to town without Greg. However, they had not shared this information with us. Given that we live in a relatively small town, it was not difficult for us to ascertain this information. It came as a surprise to learn that Melissa had been in the area for approximately a week before finally paying me a visit. It was revealed that she had been residing with one of her high school acquaintances. It is likely that this individual had informed her of my whereabouts and the fact that I had inherited the business that was rightfully hers. In response, she sought to exploit this information by visiting our parents a couple of days after her initial visit. She intended to inform them of my alleged heartlessness and expected them to be on her side, given that she now had the upper hand in the situation. She was mistaken in her assumption, as my father informed her that the business was now mine to run and that I could make any decision I deemed appropriate. He did not have any further involvement in the matter, as he was not going to micromanage me. My mother also informed her that she was the one who had wronged me by running away with my fiance after pretending to be my friend for years. Consequently, she was now deserving of the consequences she faced. She had lost the right to ask for any assistance, particularly from me, given that she had even been sending me postcards to torment me. The individual in question attempted to justify her actions by claiming that they were a consequence of the past and that she had evolved into a different person. However, her parents informed her that she was no longer welcome in their home, leading to a display of emotion and accusations of favoritism. She asserted that she had always been treated as the golden child, despite being her parents' biological child. She further claimed that her father had never treated her as an equal and that she was of no value to him. In the past, she asserted that she was the most favored child in the world. Despite her privileged upbringing, she maintained that her circumstances did not matter. She highlighted her success in business, which she regarded as a source of pride. She further stated that her relationship with Greg was not her fault. She believed that he had fallen in love with her and wanted to spend his life with her instead of her father. However, she felt that she was the one being punished for it. She claimed that the postcards she had sent were meant to be a genuine apology. She denied any intention to torment her father. This incident has been on my mind ever since my father told me about it. The assertion that she was to inherit the business and assume my role is, in a sense, accurate. However, her actions led to her downfall. I played no role in this outcome. I never advised my father to cut her out of his life or to transfer the business to me. He made these decisions independently. Furthermore, it is unjust for her to hold me responsible for this situation. The assertion that I am the golden child is demonstrably false. However, I can comprehend why she would perceive me in this light, given that she was the one who was sent away due to my complaints about her and her. The act of a parent sending their child away as a result of relentless bullying is a significant event. I am aware that it was challenging for my father, but it is important to recognize that the responsibility does not solely lie with him or me. Had he not taken the necessary measures to prevent it, there is a possibility that Melissa might have developed into an individual with criminal tendencies. The aforementioned postcards, in and of themselves, do not constitute an apology. Rather, they appear to be a mere attempt at obfuscation, designed to conceal the fact that the initial communication was, in fact, intended to be a genuine expression of remorse. It is unfortunate that the individual in question has been forced to contend with the shortcomings of her spouse, who has proven to be entirely ineffectual. Subsequently, she has been compelled to provide assistance to him in this regard. She approached me directly, and I cannot fathom the extent of difficulty she must have endured. As a result of my actions, I now find myself in a position of relative privilege, while she remains in a state of disadvantage. This discrepancy evokes a sense of empathy for her circumstances. My personal disposition is such that I am inherently inclined to extend compassion to those who are in a less advantageous position than myself. This quality of mine is an intrinsic aspect of my identity. It has been a considerable length of time since the incident in question, and I am no longer inclined to retain a negative sentiment towards my former colleague. However, I am reluctant to extend any form of assistance. The most I can offer is sympathy, but I am not inclined to engage in any further financial support. I believe that my initial misgivings about her actions have been adequately addressed. It is likely that most individuals would not extend such generosity, given the circumstances. The only reason I currently feel any sympathy for her is because this business was originally hers. Now that I am in a position of authority, I am finally getting revenge on her. I feel that this is not an appropriate course of action. It may be due to what she said about me being the golden child, or perhaps it is simply imposter syndrome, but I feel uneasy about this. I also feel uneasy about refusing to hire my former fiancé. My fiancé, who is currently residing with my stepsister, has been experiencing financial difficulties and has been receiving assistance from her. In response to the comments on this forum, I initially felt perplexed. Some individuals expressed that I was acting appropriately by declining their assistance, while the other half asserted that I had consistently been the primary source of support. Melissa's behavior was a manifestation of her underlying issues, which I had not fully anticipated. I sought counsel from my parents, as I have done in the past when facing challenges. They provided guidance, which I will elaborate on below. My father informed me that, despite the efforts made by all parties to encourage Melissa to improve her behavior, she had consistently demonstrated a lack of willingness to change. Consequently, there was little that could be done to assist her. If she had behaved herself and been a good daughter, she would have been permitted to take over the business. However, she failed at everything and made a total mockery out of our family. Consequently, she would be a fool to expect him to let her take over or even be a part of the family anymore. This made me feel considerably better because talking to my parents I will endeavor to refrain from feelings of guilt regarding the aforementioned tasks. In addition, I will provide an update regarding the recent developments. 1 week has elapsed since Melissa's arrival at my residence and subsequent visit to my parents. Since that time, we have not received any communication from her. I had almost assumed that she had returned to see de Greg until today, when she appeared at my place of employment. To make a scene, it was unfortunate because she simply walked into the premises, having been aware of the ins and outs since childhood, and gained access without alerting security. She then proceeded to take her place in front of my office and began shouting about how I had stolen this business from under her. Her nose was perpetually in the air, pretending to be a good little girl for our parents and constantly being a bootlicker so that they would approve of me. It seems that I was responsible for vilifying her by falsely accusing her of bullying me throughout our childhood. In fact, I even talked my father into sending her to rehab just so I could cement my position as the golden child of the family. She then proceeded to claim that this enterprise was rightfully hers, yet I was now preventing her from even participating in it, as I was envious that Greg had selected her over me, in contrast to our parents who had consistently favored me. As I was not accustomed to being overlooked, I became distressed. I was responsible for inciting our parents against her when I overheard the commotion. I decided to investigate the situation further after contacting security. I attempted to persuade her to cease her outburst, but she persisted for several minutes until she was ultimately ejected from the premises. I opted to contact my father before contacting the authorities to seek his counsel. He was incensed, and he advised me to proceed with calling the police. Fortunately, when the police arrived, she was still lurking nearby, presumably waiting for me to leave the building so that she could verbally berate me or perhaps even resort to physical violence. The police took her into custody and charged her with trespassing. The police also charged her with disturbing the peace, a misdemeanor, and she may be required to pay a fine or perform community service. In the most unfavorable scenario, the incident will be documented, which could have negative consequences. I informed my father of the charges and arrest, anticipating his displeasure. However, he merely expressed exasperation. He appeared exasperated and informed me that he was simply exhausted from dealing with her erratic behavior. I empathize with him, as it must be challenging to have a daughter like Melissa and bear the brunt of her misfortune, despite her tendency to attribute blame elsewhere. We have all exhibited remarkable patience. Update 3. It appears that Melissa has returned to California, as it has been a couple of days since we have heard from her. This is somewhat unusual, as we anticipated that she might lash out at us following her arrest. However, my father inquired with several individuals, who observed her heading towards the airport. I observed her at the airport the other day, which leads me to believe that she has left. It is a significant relief that she is gone, as I was genuinely concerned that she might attempt to cause an explosive incident to garner our attention. Such an outcome would be unfortunate. I am uncertain of her plans regarding the situation with Greg. Given the unlikelihood of her obtaining assistance from other sources, it is my hope that she will find a means of self-support and extricate herself from this predicament. I am not being particularly kind or compassionate in this assessment, rather, I am driven by selfish considerations. I am aware that if she fails to devise a solution, she will likely return to our residence with Greg, further complicating the situation. I sincerely hope that she or Greg will secure employment and become self-sufficient. In the meantime, I am relieved to have some respite from her presence. If she remains in this situation, she will likely return to our residence with Greg and continue to cause us inconvenience. I am therefore hoping and praying that she or Greg secures employment and is able to support themselves. For the time being, I am relieved to know that I will not have to interact with her for at least a couple of weeks. I believe that this unfortunate situation has now reached its conclusion.